Romance and rebellion intertwine as Libby attends a secret suffragette meeting, only to face the wrath of her father upon discovery. Brace yourselves, for the flames of passion and defiance are about to ignite. Chapter 4. A Taste of Freedom. The polished Ainsworth motorcar gleamed in the morning sun as Tom held the door open for Libby and Margaret. Libby's heart fluttered as she approached, noting how handsome Tom looked in his chauffeur's uniform.
"Ladies,"
Tom said with a nod, his eyes lingering on Libby for a moment longer than necessary. As Libby settled into the back seat beside her mother, she caught a whiff of Tom's cologne, a subtle, earthy scent that made her pulse quicken.
"You look lovely today, Miss Elizabeth,"
Tom said softly, his gaze meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Libby felt a blush creep up her cheeks.
"Thank you, Tom. You're looking rather dashing yourself."
Margaret raised an eyebrow at the exchange but said nothing, a knowing smile playing on her lips. As they drove, Libby leaned forward, ostensibly to give Tom directions.
"Do you think you might be able to take the scenic route, Tom? It's such a beautiful day."
Tom's eyes crinkled with amusement.
"As you wish, miss. I know just the way."
The car wound through tree-lined roads, sunlight dappling the path ahead. At one point, they hit a small bump, causing Libby to grab onto the back of Tom's seat for balance. Her fingers brushed against his shoulder, and she felt a jolt of electricity at the contact.
"Careful there, Miss Elizabeth,"
Tom murmured, his voice low and warm.
"Wouldn't want you to fall."
"I feel perfectly safe with you, Tom,"
Libby replied, her voice equally soft. As they arrived at Mrs. Stanton's estate, Tom helped the ladies out of the car. When it was Libby's turn, he held her hand a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles.
"Enjoy your charity luncheon, Miss Elizabeth,"
he said with a wink, letting her know he was in on the secret. Libby grinned.
"I'm sure it will be most illuminating."
The luncheon was everything Libby had hoped for and more. The women there were passionate, intelligent, and determined. She found herself swept up in discussions of voting rights, equality, and social change. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly alive and purposeful. As they were preparing to leave, Mrs. Stanton approached Libby.
"My dear, you have a quick mind and a lot of potential. We could use someone like you in our Boston office."
Libby's eyes widened with excitement.
"Do you really think so? I would be honoured to help in any way I can."
The drive home was filled with animated chatter as Libby recounted the events of the luncheon to her mother and Tom. She was so engrossed in her enthusiasm that she didn't notice the troubled look that crossed Tom's face at the mention of Boston. As they pulled up to the Ainsworth estate, Libby's high spirits came crashing down. There, waiting on the front steps with a thunderous expression, stood her father.
"Elizabeth, Margaret, inside now."
Congressman Ainsworth bellowed. Libby exchanged a panicked look with her mother as they hurried inside, leaving Tom standing uncertainly by the car. In his study, Congressman Ainsworth paced like a caged lion.
"Do you care to explain why I received a call from George Houghton, telling me he saw my wife and daughter at a suffragette meeting?"
"Father, I can explain,"
Libby began, but he cut her off.
"Explain? Explain how you've embarrassed this family, how you've jeopardized my position."
He turned to Margaret.
"And you? How could you encourage this behavior?"
Margaret stood tall, facing her husband.
"Harold, times are changing. Perhaps it's time we listen to what Libby has to say."
But the congressman was beyond reason.
"This ends now. Elizabeth, you are forbidden from attending any more of these meetings. And as for you,"
he said, rounding on his wife,
"I expected better judgment from you."
As the argument escalated, Libby felt her dreams slipping away. But beneath the disappointment, a spark of defiance ignited. She thought of the women at the luncheon, of her mother's quiet rebellion, of Tom's unwavering support. This wasn't the end, she realized. It was just the beginning of her fight.